My show is pretty simple. I interview ordinary people that have accomplished extraordinary things in their life. And my guest today, BJ Harrison, checks off all the boxes. Let me tell you about BJ. BJ has produced and narrated over 620 audiobooks. He has done characters from witches to young ingenues to gangsters to Shakespearean characters. He also has his own podcast called Classic Tales, and he has produced and narrated 700 episodes. He's a member of the Screen Actors Guild and the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. He has produced and narrated for well-known publishers such as Simon & Schuster, Tantor, HarperCollins, Penguin, and Audible, just to name a few. He was a finalist in the Independent Audiobook Awards, which we'll talk about, and also a nominee for the Voice Arts Award. He has an array of character voices, dialects, and accents at his fingertips. And let me just tell you this from a personal approach. If you go on Audible and you just type in the name BJ Harrison and listen to his samples, you'll become a fan. Let me read a testimonial from one of his fans. Quote, "In the world of audiobooks, the reader is essential for a good listening experience. And BJ Harrison is one of the best, if not the best. I am a fan of his and have spent many hours listening to and enjoying his work." Unquote. That comes from the Academy Award film composer Joe Renzetti. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest, BJ Harrison.
Yeah.
Well, BJ, how are you, man?
I'm flushed. I'm embarrassed. My gosh, I had that. What an intro.
I know. But listen, I always like to start off by telling people how we met. And if I remember correctly, we met first at just a small luncheon we have. We have a group called Utah Audiobook Narrators. We're both from Utah. And we just met at a luncheon and spoke briefly. But then later on, we became reacquainted at a big conference for the League of Utah Writers here in the state of Utah, when we had kind of an exhibit set up for audiobook narration. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was great.
You were an amazing person. I had no idea when I met you all of the things that you accomplished in your life. And so I was just overwhelmed after I started to getting to know you. And they say in some of your testimonies, you're such a nice guy, and they are right. You are such a nice guy, going along with your unbelievable talent. So let's talk about BJ as a child. First of all, is BJ your birth name and stands for something?
It stands for Brent J. Harrison, and I've always hated it. If I was a fighter, they would be fighting words, but I'm not a fighter. So, but since I was a child, like a child, I think they were on birth announcements. They called me BJ, announcing that I was here. So, so I've never liked it or used it, but that's
right. So even as a child, you were called BJ
then?
By your friends and everything.
Friends, everything. Yes.
Awesome. Now let's talk about this. You told me in your bio that you were 8 years old when you started doing Muppet impressions. Now, you know that I'm going to ask you to do one of the Muppets, right?
Gosh, is this an audition?
An audition.
Oh man, no. I haven't done Muppet impressions for years.
Except which characters did you do in this talent show?
Oh gosh, I probably did Swedish Chef, and but I remember when I did Animal, I just got really close to the mic and went Animal, and it just rattled and then I acted like I was all nervous and shaking, about to fall down. And I was 8, and it was so unexpected to have a kid that into what he was doing, right, that it killed. They loved it.
And You win the talent show?
Well, I mean, there was no winner. There was
No
just,
prizes.
no
Okay.
prizes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
Right.
right.
Cake.
All right. Now you have prizes though, right? We already read some of the awards they've been nominated for and finalists. So now there's awards attached to what you're doing.
Well,
Well,
I'm lucky. I don't know what to say about that.
all right. So let's go on just a little bit. So what happens after 8? How you mentioned to me privately that you struggled in reading just a little bit. Is that right?
Yeah, quite a bit. I had a hard time reading. I was not a really smart. Well, I'm still, anyway. I wasn't a really sharp or brilliant or talented or anything. I was just a kid, growing up, just a kid going to school, and I struggled with reading. I just had a hard time reading. I kind of I could read, but I kind of plateaued around, Encyclopedia Brown and Choose Your Own Adventure books. It's like that's anything more advanced than that. I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. I remember my mom when I was in 8th grade, she got me The Wind in the Willows, and I couldn't do it. And but the thing is, I wanted to so bad. I wanted to find out all of these amazing characters, the Three Musketeers and the Count of Monte Cristo and Treasure Island, and because I love those adventure stories and I wanted to really get them, but that whole world was kind of closed off for me. I wanted to so badly, but I couldn't do it. And then so the way that I got into audiobooks, I found a recording of Basil Rathbone recording the Telltale, or no, it was The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe, and he did a couple other ones. And that recording changed my life because I got it. All of the light bulbs I ever had been keeping went off at the same time because there was acting and there was this amazing language that I could understand, and having an actor interpret it for me made it like, well, this is doable now. And so I went crazy discovering audiobooks, and this was when I was in my early 20s. So we're kind of jumping ahead here, but anyway, that recording it changed my life, and I named my son after Basil Rathbone.
Really? Wow. That's amazing. Mine was James Dale.
Oh yeah.
Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm.
I just got so excited. I thought, I think I can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. So listen, so we kind of jumped just a little bit.
Yep. Sorry about that.
No, that's good. But you mentioned the fact of you became a scenic artist. Was this after you graduated from high school and then went to college? Is that right? You went to college?
I didn't go to much college. I just struggled and then stopped.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I'm not a college graduate. I'll just put that out there. I got married very, very young and kind of immediately had to start taking care of a family. And I tried going to school and doing all of that, but I was just lucky enough. My father-in-law got me into doing scenery because I was in art a little bit. And so my father-in-law got me into doing working for movies, and that just kind of took off, and I was able to do that for 20 years and kind of rise up, and that's how I took care of my family for 20 years.
Wow.
Was being an artist in film and television and trade shows and whatever work I could hustle, So I just kind of had to teach myself whatever I could find. And get whatever training on the job that I could to kind of survive as a creative artist type person who's not that great. I say I'm an artist. It's like I know how to paint things so that they crackle and stuff like that. Not real art, but.
So you didn't take any official acting classes at all?
No.
Wow.
No, sorry.
No, that's.
I'm an autodidact. I've looked it up. It was in a book I did last week. It's a self-taught person. So I've just had to kind of scrap and pick up whatever I could. So yeah, I'm not.
You are an amazing actor.
Well,
I think you were just kind of born with that talent. Some people are. I've worked with some actors that I've taught. They were just born with that talent.
Hmm.
And I think you have that talent. So you said that for 20 years, you listen to audiobooks every day.
Hmm.
If you had to pick out your favorite beside the Basil Rathbone thing, of all the ones you listened to, what was another one that really caught your attention? You thought, wow, I want to do that.
David, the recording that Patrick Tull did of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. That was another one because the book is so thick, it's so big, and I wanted to learn. I wanted to read Charles Dickens because I loved Christmas Carol adaptations that I'd seen, But when I was able to listen to that and have all of those amazing characters, he did such a great job with all of that. That also just made me go, "Oh, wow, this is incredible, absolutely incredible." That narrator also did a bunch of the Aubrey Maturin, um, Patrick O'Brien books, which are the big ships with sails, the Napoleonic Wars kind of stuff, and I loved all of that, and I thought, gosh, this guy got into like this series, and he has all of this work now. There's like 20 books in this series. This is a good idea. How cool would it be to do that? So I remember thinking that too.
Have you captured any of those styles of any of those audiobooks that you listen to, of any of those narrators? Did you capture any of those styles, do you think, as you developed and morphed into this audiobook narrator?
Well, for years I tried to, because I didn't have a background in acting, I was embarrassed. I didn't want people to know I was from Utah or like from wherever. I wanted to hide who I really was. And so I did it wrong for a long time because I tried to sound like Basil Rathbone and and I tried to sound like James Mason and stuff or whatever, But so it took me a long time to get over that and really develop my own true, um, honest and vulnerable delivery that I hopefully I'm always trying to make sure that I keep that fresh. But if you're asking if I've copied people, I've copied everybody I possibly could to try to just borrow from you borrow from everywhere. That's a good character voice. Hey, I can do that one. I can do that. So yeah, I've just kind of gathered what I could and taught myself.
So, talk about some of the steps that you had to achieve to become so proficient at audiobook narration, where you've done over 620 audiobooks. What were some of the steps to get to that point?
Well, it started when I did my podcast. My podcast started in 2007. So there were only like 3 podcasts out there. There weren't very many. This is before iPhones, old click wheel iPods and stuff like that. So there weren't very many. So I did a podcast. I did 3 episodes and I released it to Apple, and they actually featured me on their new and notable main page on the iTunes Music Store, which is what it was back then. And that it just kind of took a life of its own, and that got really, really popular. And because nobody else was doing that at the time, there weren't a lot of high quality, well produced fiction podcasts at the time. And so my friend of mine told me how to do it. He told me about podcasting. I didn't have a computer at the time, so I borrowed one from my stepbrother, and I didn't have internet at my home, so I used it at the shop that I was working to upload my podcasts. And then I just put them up there and looked at my numbers. And one day I came in. It started, and you think, oh, it's going to be huge. And there's like, my mom's listened to it or whatever. You got one. And then it just took off, and it was crazy. So after that happened, I peaked at like the number 3 audiobook spot in iTunes when I did the Pit and the Pendulum. And after that, Audible or iTunes, an Apple executive actually reached out to me, and so did Audible, saying, "Hey, we're starting a new program where we can we're reaching out to people who have home studios, and we want to include you in that and see if how it works having a home produced audiobook, not in one of our studios, but you do it at home and see how that works. So I'm like, okay. So they gave me a couple audiobooks through Audible, and I did okay. I struggled through and did the best I could, and then after that, they started up the ACX program, and then I got most of my work through them. I did a lot of independent work through them, and I'm actually still transitioning to do work through more and more publishers now. I'm kind of the guy who's done 600 books that nobody's ever heard of, because I haven't kind of had to do my own thing, make my own way. So that's kind of how it happened.
Right. So as far as your training is concerned, then you've never had an agent and have done actual narration for voiceover or anything until you got into audiobook narration. Is that correct?
That's correct. It was because I was able to go look at the books that I've done. Then I was able to get an agent and get their interest. So
wow, that's a remarkable story, and I think it goes along with my whole premise of my show. Is that just an ordinary guy,
oh
or
yeah,
an ordinary girl that I interview, and they do extraordinary things in their life. What do you say to people, BJ, when people say, well, you're not trained, and how did you accomplish all this? How do you respond to people when they ask you those kind of questions?
yeah, I'm always trying to level up and get better. It kind of bakes in this kind of feeling of, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to, the volume of work that I've done does not mean that I'm super, super competent at every aspect of this industry by any means. I learned by doing. That's how I figured it out. So some are better than others, but on all of them, I've just kind of developed the skill to do my best and do the best that I can. And I'm lucky enough that people are like, okay, that's pretty good. But no, I realize there's always room to improve. After
Right.
600 and however many books I've done, there's always room to improve. That's the craft.
Do you tell, we might have a lot of young listeners, I know, that are potential audiobook narrators and voiceover people. Do you tell them, though, that it's pretty much a given now that they should try to get as much training as they can instead of just getting up in front of a microphone and experimenting? What would you say?
Oh, heck yes. Absolutely. I mean, the more training you can possibly get, the better. I mean, that's a shortcut. I had to learn so many things the hard way. This is learning the hard way. But my word, if you can get with a good trainer, because I've been able to just jump, I feel like I've been able to jump by leaps and bounds once I started getting training. Even after I'd done 500 books, then I started the training that other people had been doing. And then it's so many things just clicked into place. Oh, so many things I've been fighting over the years. So by all means, get training, go to university, get all of the training you can, because why not benefit from people who've done it before and can teach you the way? So
you mentioned ACX, and you mentioned that was a stepping stone into getting probably involved with your publishers, correct? So
yeah,
I mean, a little bit, is that right? You started somewhere, right? That's how you started.
Yeah,
Right.
that's when, because I didn't know where to find audiobook work. I didn't.
Right.
So I had one publisher, Audible, that reached out to me, end of list. And so then I started auditioning. I was in the pilot program, so I was in the call when they said what it was and everything, and I helped them start it up and everything. And so that was the only place I knew how to get audiobook work. So that's what I did for a while. So yeah.
How popular is audiobook narration right now as far as people listening to audiobooks?
Oh gosh, I'm sorry. I don't know the actual numbers, but I know that every year Audible comes out and says they're growing by leaps and bounds by every, outrageous numbers, because the technology is actually it just makes it more and more and more accessible. The easier it is to digest this media and everything, it's just getting more and more and more. But I don't have the actual numbers. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean statistically. I just meant by popularity, because I know Audio Publishing Association does publish those statistics, and they're astronomical about how many people listen to audiobooks. But the thing that I wanted to ask was also the fact of, why do you think people now, especially, we're not talking about COVID only, but now it seems like even more young people are not reading books, but they're listening to books. Why do you think there's this overwhelming attraction to audiobooks? And it's just grown so much. What do you think has attributed to that?
Well, the accessibility, but I mean, for me at least, I mean, the reason if I am a well-read person, which I wouldn't say, the reason I know and am familiar with the classics is because I was able to listen to them on the job and listen to them for 20 years while I was working, because you can listen to audiobooks when you're doing all sorts of things and learn new things. I mean, the nonfiction books that are out there are amazing. And it's incredible to be able to do whatever you want, housework, whatever it is, or even some vocations, and be learning and listening and being entertained and becoming a more well-read person, or whatever you want to do. I just think that's wonderful. I'm thrilled to be a part of this amazing vocation to make basically incredible things more accessible to more people. It's wonderful.
It's almost like when I say we, because we're audiobook narrators, we provide a service for people. I know I've talked to some people that have dealt with blind people, and it's really interesting that they say that they love getting audiobooks because obviously Braille is available, but they can listen and it brings it alive to them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. So let's talk about the average audiobook narrator, because people ask all the time. Another question I receive is the fact of, can you make money doing audiobooks? What do you say to those individuals?
Audiobooks, as you know, is on the low side of compensation when it comes to voiceover work. It's, I think, the lowest side. This is bottom. It's more of a lifestyle to be able to a choice is what I've heard it compared to. For me to make a living just doing audiobooks, and that's what I primarily do. I just do audiobooks, but I need to record, because you got to crank it out. So I've had to develop a system where I can record 10 hours a week. I shoot for that. Sometimes I do a little more, sometimes a little less. But I need to record around 10 hours a week to make sure all the bills get paid. And that has to be 10 hours of material that's not done on, you're not doing it on the cheap or you're lazy. That's got stuff that's going to be that's going to garner 5-star reviews. That's got to be top-notch stuff that you're cranking out every single week. So can you make an income doing it? Yeah, you can. It's hard. You can develop some tips and tricks and some workflows and some ways to get around that. Because on top of that 10 hours, you've got to do your marketing, you've got to do your social media stuff, you've got to build in time to go to all of the networking events and everything like that. There's a lot to it. It's not easy, but it's worth it. I love it. So it's possible. It's not easy.
Yeah, I think you have to love it.
Yeah.
Right. But take us through maybe a 10-hour day as far as the step-by-step process. What does it look like for you for the 10-hour day when you start your narration from the beginning to the end? Just a little bit of a summary of what do you go through in those 10 hours?
For a regular day?
Yeah, for a regular day.
Okay. Well, I'll wake up and then I'll answer emails, and then I'll do some marketing. That can be outreach to authors, outreach to publishers, follow up on stuff that I've already sent out, whatever the marketing is. But I try and do that every day, a little bit every day. And then I will go into my narration and I'll record a 1 hour, I call them episodes because that's how I started with. But I'll record a finished hour. I'll sit down and I'll record a finished hour, and I try and get all that done by lunchtime. I eat an apple every day for my breakfast, and I have coffee. So it's like that's all I have in the morning, so that there's nothing competing with the old pipes. So that'll be that. I'll have lunch, and then in the afternoon I'll do another episode, another full hour, finished hour, and that can take 2 to 3 hours depending on the material and um, and everything. And then I try and block off time in the evenings to spend with my family. So I'm with them from about, hopefully I'm done by 6, from 6 to 9, or from 5 to 9, or whatever. And then when people go to bed, I'll actually stay up a little bit and usually do work on my website or something like that. Sometimes I'll even record another episode from 9 to midnight or whatever. And then and that's basically my day.
So it sounds almost like more than 10 hours at times.
Yeah, most of the time it's more. I'm just working kind of all the time. I'm glad I've been able to train myself to block off that time and really make that for the family.
Right.
And but that is one thing too. I always make myself accessible, even when I'm recording, even when I'm doing whatever for my family. If because I mean they live here. I'm just in my studio in my basement. I need to be responsive and understanding when they need me to do stuff, or I need to go pick up kids or whatever like that. It's one of the wonderful things about working at home and having this schedule is the flexibility that it offers. But if I'm just left to my own, that's kind of what I shoot for.
Do you do vocal warm-ups?
Hmm. Oh yeah, yeah. I have a 5 minute, like a singing arpeggio kind of thing that I do, and then I also I will read about a page of the material I'm about to do with a piece of. Actually, I'll just show you. I bite on the end of this, wherever it is. It's
Oh, okay.
this is my entertainer's secret throat spray. So I'll just bite on the end of this, and I'll clean it off afterwards. And while I have that in my mouth, I'll read the first page or so of what I'm working on, and at that point, hopefully, if everything sounds good, then I'll be able to start.
The other thing that I've noticed that people have asked me is the voice changes from the morning until the evening. So how do you match that up from the beginning of the day to if you come back and do pickups or whatever it may be in the evening? How do you match those voices up when your voice changes?
I just being as close as you can to the material, to your just tuning your ears so that you hear, oh man, I'm sounding pretty raspy, because you can do. I mean, it is what it is, but there are some adjustments you can make, and so it's just has to do with training yourself to make sure that you sound as close as you can to what you did last night, or what pickups you're doing, or whatever it is. But yeah, there's a definite change, and you got to adjust for that.
Do you do multiple books at the same time during your 10-hour workday? Do you do multiple books, or you just work on that one book only throughout that 10 hours?
I like it best to do it all. I like it best to do it all at once, because I like to research something and then have the characters or the content in my head, and then just have that go through the way. The longer, the better for me. And it's funny because just yesterday I spent the morning recording my podcast for the week, and then I had another hour or 2 hours of a nonfiction audiobook that I just did really quickly. But so at that point was brought home. I don't like to do that. I like to just go for it. Sometimes you have to, but I do prefer having him in my head and just going to town.
With 620 audiobooks and all of the classic tales you do you ever find your characters overlapping and then all of a sudden you listen to one of your books, maybe after you've already produced it and narrated and went, boy, that just sounds like the last guy I did? Do you ever have that crossover?
When I first started, I tried to have that be a different cast of characters for everyone. But that could, I'm sorry, I can only do that for so long. So after a while, I just kind of go, oh, that's James Mason. Okay. Oh, that's, the Basil Rathbone Sherlock Holmes character. That's this one. And I just that's my old lady voice. That's the old lady mid-American. That's the old lady, British or whatever. That's Mrs. McGonagall. Whatever it is, I just, whatever little tricks I can do to keep the cast of characters consistent within the book in my head. That's what I can do. But I kind of gave up on trying to make everything I've ever done sound different a while ago.
Almost an impossibility, right?
Yeah, I
Right.
can't do it.
Right. Let's talk about dialects and accents because I noticed that I listened to your samples and they are spot on. And I'm a dialectician, so I can validate that. But how did you learn all these accents and dialects? Just strictly by your ear, or did you study phonetics? How did you learn them?
I'm so not impressive. I don't have any magical thing to say. I just listened. I took some books back when I got a book by Robert Blumenfeld that had a whole bunch of accents and some CDs in them. And so I would listen to the dialect, study it, but really I'm just a copier. I just listen and I can just hear what they're doing and I just copy it. And the thing is, in accent work, you can get so far doing that, but there really is an extra edge when you've actually been trained and you've had the training and you can hire someone or be taught by someone like yourself who is an expert and can get you there. And so while I can do a lot of accents, I really am starting to really feel that gap of where I would like to be to where I am now. But so to answer your question, for what you're hearing, that's just me giving it my best shot, researching wherever I can and going for it. So
What about characters? Do you hear character voices in your head, and do you read each of the books pretty much before you decide which characters, when there's multiple characters in the book? Do you hear the characters' voices in your head? How do you come up with those character voices?
I used to map them out. I used to actually do a mind map and write down the characters and then go find images on the internet that reminded me, oh, that's that character, that's that character. I don't do that so much anymore just because, I don't know, just because I've done so many. They're easier to keep track of. And so, but I will make notes. I'll make a little dossier before I start. Like, this is that character, this is that character, and this is where they're from. If there's any contextual clues in the book itself, I'll write down where this character's from. This one has a high-pitched voice. There's one of a murderer that I'm doing now that their voice changes 3 times because they disguise it in different ways. And so I've had to just things like that. The most important thing is being true to the context of the script. And once I know what the script says and, listen to what, if the author has any notes or the producers or whoever have any notes, just do that. And then I just kind of do it. I make a recording of every character though. Once I establish a character's voice, I make a recording of that and create a library so that whenever they come back again in 3 chapters, I can listen and make sure they're consistent. So
Right. And so as far as the characters that you portray, have you ever noticed yourself getting emotional when you're reading a piece where you've had to stop and go, I'm too emotional. I have to stop for a moment and collect my emotions. Has that ever happened to you?
yeah, it has. Yeah, there's been a couple times when it's usually, I mean, the kind of stuff I get, it's pretty light. A lot of the fiction I do is on the lighter side. Some of the classics can be heavier. Some of the nonfiction stuff that I run into that I'm presented with, it can be where it's a real person telling a real tragic story. I've had to stop and collect myself, and because you want to be as real and as close to the material as possible. But yeah, I mean that's part of the job, is being as close and really embodying as much as you possibly can all of the characters and their situations. You really want to visualize that. So
I've talked to some people and they're very experienced, and some of them say, I don't read the book. I just kind of go through it and scan it or whatever. Do you read the entire book of almost every book that you're going to narrate? Do you read the entire text?
yes, and I need to read it, and I need to just prep it. You have to do that prep work. I mean, and I've tried it the other way. I've tried to do it cheaper and easier to just jump in and do it. It just doesn't work.
Too many surprises.
Oh yeah, I've had to years ago when I would I'm just going to start reading it. It's like, oh no, that's the murderer, and he was John Boy from the Waltons, or he can't. That won't work, So yeah, that it just doesn't work. It's
No.
not being. I don't think it's being responsible. I mean, people are giving you their baby. People have worked so hard on this book. it's responsible to read it through, do all of your prep work, make sure everything is correct as good as you can, and and do the best job you can.
Let's talk about that relationship between the author and the narrator. How important is that, do you think? Because I've read some of your testimonials, and it sounds like the authors got to know you personally. So, how does that work with some of the authors that you've worked with?
Well, it's part of the job is learning how to present yourself in the digital realm, and in where a lot of the correspondence is through email, and is through being accommodating, being flexible, being understanding, being kind when they're asking questions, and and just I mean, our job is to make their vision a reality. So when they're listening to it, they're like, yes, that's even better than what I imagined. And so that's it's an incredible job that we have to be able to do that. And so and it's tricky because a lot of the people in the testimonials that you read, I haven't met face to face. I haven't even talked to some of these people on the phone. I've never heard their voices before. But we have working relationships where I've done 40 of their books and they hire me again and again, and we have a good working rapport. It's more challenging because you can't just meet them. So you have to kind of create a digital presence, a digital personality of being accommodating, being understanding, being patient, hitting your deadlines, being professional. So I think that is what you're seeing in those testimonials is me learning. And by the way, it didn't start this way. I had to learn this the hard way, which means lots of mistakes. But that is what that is the result of is learning that.
Let me read one of the testimonials that gave me this. Yeah, they gave me this question. This is quote, BJ Harrison is hands down one of the nicest, most helpful, most professional people I've ever worked with. My readers love him, which is an added bonus. But more than that, he does a phenomenal job on my books. I honestly had no idea how talented he was when we first started, nor how much I would need that talent for all my many characters. I am blessed to have such a great narrator on my team. Thank you, BJ, for being one of the best in the business. And that's from author Kristen Painter. And I looked her up, and wow, she does a myriad of books,
Yeah.
award winning. And I just was kind of touched by that because of what you just explained to me. That you've never met Kristen Painter, have you?
I've never met Kristen, and we've done I think 65 books now, and she's amazingly prolific, but we're just a good match. I really love her books because when we started, the first one, she does paranormal romantic comedies,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just so fun. She's created this world where there's vampires and werewolves and all sorts of stuff. So they come from all over the world. She didn't know when I got the first book through ACX. So this was just one I got through ACX that turned into years of work. But she didn't know when I got the ones I did a good British and I did a good whatever, that was good. That worked for that book. But she later had whole books that took place in Ireland and took place in and where there was a dragon who was Russian, and so the whole thing was Russian, and that was all sorts of things like that didn't even there's leprechauns, and then there's water witches and all sorts of things that I didn't even so it's been just a blast doing her stuff, and she's introduced me to some of her amazing friends, and I've done work for some of them and everything like that. So it's been a blast. It's just been so fun.
Well, what was interesting is that she puts these characters in like real situations like, in real life. And I started reading summaries and listening to some of your samples. And I just thought, I've got to listen to those books. They were fascinating. What a magical world she creates.
It's amazing. She's created this world called Nocturne Falls where there's real supernaturals and real stuff like that, but they play it like it's a theme park kind of thing where it's like they're hiding in plain sight, but they're real, but everybody thinks that they're costumed people, and so she'll take all of these different things, but then she's expanded them and invited other people to write stories about her world. And so that got me even more work. It was a really smart idea.
Right. So let's talk about reviewers for just a minute, because on many of the voiceover audiobook narration pages on Facebook, people have a tendency to talk about that quite a bit. How much value do you put in the fact these are great reviews, but what about your actual listeners? How much value do you put in, and do you read them at all, as far as your constant listeners to your audiobooks? How much value do you place on those?
Oh, are you kidding? Those are my patrons. Those are the folks that are, they actually are supporting the podcast and stuff like that. And so, yeah, absolutely. I want to hear what they have to say, and even the negative ones. It's like, hey, it's not like I'm all that, there's always room to improve. And so even ones that are like, there are some that are just absolutely crazy bonkers over the top. Like, this is the worst narration ever. It's like, okay, I got it. I'm not for everybody. That's fine. But took a while because see, in the beginning, when I was still trying to sound like Basil Rathbone, I had an affect that was off-putting. It really was. And some people could overlook that and see what I was trying to do. And some people, it just rubbed them the wrong way. And I get that. I don't blame them. So hopefully I don't do that anymore. But if I do, let me know, because I don't want to do it anymore. But,
right.
So, yeah.
And I think what's important is, what people need to remember is that if there's 300 reviews out there and 299 did not like your book or did not like what you did, you need to really take stock of that.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
Instead of people saying sometimes, oh, just ignore it if it's negative. Well, you can't ignore 299 out of 300.
Yeah. People are, if they don't like something, they're more likely to review it and complain about it than they are to praise it if they enjoy it. But yeah, I think it's like, nobody wants to hear it, but some of the best moves I've made personally and professionally have been when I've had to listen to stuff that was uncomfortable. You gotta be strong enough and resilient enough to listen to that, take it in, and do better.
I heard a wonderful comment at one of our Brigham City writers meetings we had. And no, I think we were having Utah audiobook narrator. We were having one of our little monthly meetings. Mm-hmm. And somebody said, don't blame characters that have been written poorly by authors in your book. Don't blame the characters, because the characters didn't write it. The authors did. And I think that's really important to remember as a narrator, that the characters didn't do this. The author did this. And so I think you're not going to find every book beautifully written, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. And especially working for independents, you get people who are coming in at all levels of writing ability. And, our job as narrators is to elevate it as much as we can. Just make it digestible, make it sound really natural to be read aloud, to give characters life, to just make it as good as we can. And that's a fun process, to take something that might be, on the other side, if it's a really well written but hard to digest nonfiction piece, it's a real stamp of approval, I think, to be able to take something that's hard to plow through and make it digestible and enjoyable to the listener.
Here's a question that I get from a lot of different people with as many books as you've narrated. What was the most challenging book you ever narrated?
The most challenging book, I don't have one. Probably the ones that are basically what we've been talking about. The ones that are, maybe written at a lower level of writing ability, that are a little harder just to read aloud, where the character's a little more loosey-goosey. So there's that spectrum, and then on the other side, some of the more dense nonfiction pieces about, things I'm really not familiar with, that I've had to basically train myself, learn about economics and how to talk about how to talk about mathematical formulas and stuff like that that I'm really just not familiar with. Where I've actually had to do some education before I could talk about it realistically. That would be on the other side.
Are there any genre of books that you really enjoy narrating?
I love doing the classics. I love doing the classics. That is what I want to do. That I don't care if publishers come to me with like a nonfiction that's not super exciting, or I get a book that I'm like, hey, that's fine, because I get to do my podcast and the classics, and I get to keep doing that. And that's really been, when I'm in the middle of something that's more difficult or whatever, it's been great to be able to do that. I don't know. Since audiobooks opened that up for me, that access to the classics, I love feeling that I'm helping other people run across stuff they otherwise wouldn't. So
what are some concerns you have about your future in audiobook narration? What are some of the things that you kind of projecting 5 years, 10 years down the road as far as where you will be? What are some of the concerns you may have?
The industry is changing so rapidly. I don't know. I don't know where we'll be in 5-10 years. The actual way that audiobooks are being recorded and the styles and the methods and that's ever evolving. Even the recording of it and there's so much of this that is changing. So my approach is, and this is just the way that I am. I'm not that good at thinking way in the future. I can see so many steps ahead, kind of, and that's it. So I have a set of things that I'm working on that I can do, that I see clearly. And at that point, I'll just go that far and see what's next.
I've been reading about, and I think everybody is aware now of the automated voices that they are creating nowadays. And I read recently where they're working on transferring that to maybe audiobook narration, where they would have an automated voice. The thing that I'm not concerned about is I don't know if a robotic or whatever you're recreating can somehow teach emotion. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I absolutely do. There's something about that personal. I mean, the audiobooks, it's so intimate. It's such an intimate, personal kind of connection that you have with the listener. It's, like I said, it's a great privilege. And so to take that actual personal human element out, even though they can read the word "the" really good or whatever it is, and technically sound really good and even have a lot of emotion, to remove that human, it dilutes the whole thing. It turns it into something else.
Yeah. It almost goes back to, and this is no in any way criticism of novice people that start audiobooks, but if you work with people that are novices and do coaching, it's really kind of interesting, because you go, are you just going to record it that way? You just read the book. You didn't put anything behind it. You just read the book.
Mm-hmm.
And they go, oh, did I just read the book? I said, yeah, you just read the book. You just read the words. Now we need to go ahead and talk about what's behind the words. So I think you're very accurate in that. So BJ, as we're wrapping it up, you mentioned your family, and I'm so glad you did, because all of my guests mention that their family comes first in their life, which I am so impressed that people put their families before everything. How has your family adjusted to you doing audiobooks? And pretty much you kind of remain in your basement or wherever your studio is for a long period of time. How has your family adjusted to that, especially your wife?
I am so lucky, because my wife grew up in an environment of freelancing. Her father was a production designer for television and film. Like I said, he got me into the industry. And so she doesn't want me to have a full-time job working for someone else. She's always been so supportive and pushed me to be a freelancer. And so I've been just lucky to do that. So she's been just of course, I mean, she's my soulmate. She's the person for me, and I'm so thrilled for everything that she's been so supportive. And of course, the kids. I have 3 kids, and I record, and they've like lived their poor lives um, in a sound studio, basically. My daughter is above me, and her room is above my studio, and so she's had to like know Dad's recording, so we can't, got to stay out of the thing. Or every time that she opens up her drawers, it sounds like a bowling alley, so you can't do that. So and my son writes outside him, and he has a bedroom right here. I mean, for years he had to like just be quiet when he would, So yeah, it does demand a lot of the family, and I try and always be understanding for everything that I put them through, because you do.
Right.
So
How critical is your family on your audiobooks?
how critical are they?
When they listen to them, because they know you sit down there and they produce them all day long. But how critical are they when they hear the final product?
Oh, they don't listen to too much. They don't. They've heard enough of Dad talking, so they're not going to go out and listen to more.
Okay.
So, but
Yeah.
my daughter, when she was younger, she would go to sleep, and the boys too. They would go to sleep listening to Alice in Wonderland or whatever it was. They would listen to Arsène Lupin or Sherlock Holmes when they would go to sleep. And so Goldie, my daughter, she's like memorized Alice in Wonderland, but she memorizes these characters. And I did it like 10 years ago. But
Right.
to her, that's like right there. She knows them so well. And she'll like, remember when this and this and this happened? I'm like, I don't, but I'm glad you like it,
Right.
So
Yeah. My grandchildren, it's really kind of interesting. My sons are in their 40s, but it's 45 and 46. But it's really interesting because I have grandchildren,
mhm.
and my sons will play some of my audiobooks. I do children's books sometimes. And then my sons will go, "That's Grandpa." And they go, "No, no, it's not Grandpa." That's somebody else. I don't know who that is. But yeah, but it's really kind of cool. All right. So here's a question for you. If you were to leave a legacy for your family and friends, how would you want to be remembered?
I would want to be remembered as somebody who, basically through my podcast. I want to be remembered as somebody who kind of spent a lot of the time recording stuff to make stuff more approachable for people who otherwise wouldn't have run across it. If I can be remembered as somebody who somebody can say, I was never going to read Ivanhoe or whatever it was, but I ran across this and I've been exposed to authors I'd never heard of, been exposed to that. That's what I'm going for. That's what I'm working on. And to have that be a legacy would be incredible.
I think we're very fortunate because in our industry, when we pass away, our families can listen to us again. They can listen to our books. They can listen to our voiceovers, film acting, whatever it may be. A lot of people don't have that same opportunity, but artists do. And so I think we're very, very fortunate to be in the industry we're in.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
BJ, we need to wrap this up, but you have been an extraordinary guest. But what are some parting thoughts or words of wisdom that you would like to share with us before we close with our interview today?
I would say, for like words of wisdom, a tip: don't ask for anyone's permission to follow your passion. Don't wait for someone to say, yeah, you can do that. Just jump in, or don't wait until you have that level of schooling or that level of whatever. If you're ready to jump off and run as far as you can and do everything that you want to. If someone's going to make movies or write novels or act or paint, someone's going to do it. Someone's going to do all that stuff. It might as well be you. If you feel like you're getting pushed that way, I'd say go for it. Learn everything you can. It's a wonderful ride.
Beautiful comments to end our interview today. BJ, thank you so much. And we want to thank our host today as well, Coast to Coast, for allowing us this opportunity to be live. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been How Did I Get Here with BJ Harrison and Joseph Batesel as your host. Have a pleasant day.